We did NFC yesterday. We're doing AFC today. It's the single most pressing need for each team in the AFC with a draft fit that fills it on today's episode of Renner Ranks.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into today's episode of Renner Ranks, your go-to daily ranks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special shout out to those everydayers out there. Don't forget, subscribe, follow, like for free. It is on YouTube. It is on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. I, of course, am your host, Mike Renner, NFL draft analyst. Today's podcast is sponsored by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll go through the methodology here once again. Did it yesterday's show, but we'll go through it just real quickly once again. Not picking any quarterbacks for this biggest pressing needs list. Those, obviously, you just treat them a little differently in terms of that conversation, shall we say. No quarterbacks for this, but then it's the one where it's like they have nobody at the moment in time. Not necessarily the one I'm going to prioritize in the first round, right? If you really need a punter, I'm not going to advocate drafting a punter in the third round like the Packers did with B.J. Sanders back in the mid-2000s. Don't go ahead and do that, right? That's a later round need. These aren't necessarily what I'd prioritize for each team in the first round, but definitely something that at some point needs to be addressed, even if a lot of these, why I put these on here, is because a lot of these positions are so barren that even if they get addressed in free agency, they'll still probably more than likely need one come draft time. So it's the one need that more likely than not, more likely than any other position on the roster, again, maybe except for quarterback for some of these teams, that will be taken come draft time. Let's get right into it then. AFC East, Buffalo Bills, and for them, it's the defensive tackle position that I will be looking at just because outside of Ed Oliver, you got a bunch of guys hitting free agency. You got Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Poona Ford, Linval Joseph, all in free agency. Yes, will they re-sign some of them? I would imagine so. But even if that's the case, I do think it's still a position that they will probably be attacking come draft time. Will they do it with their first rounder? I don't think the value's there, assuming guys like Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton are off the board. And truthfully, Johnny Newton, Illinois defensive tackle, plays a similar role to what Ed Oliver does in that Buffalo defense. They're probably looking for more of a nose tackle type, should they be drafting one. And the dream scenario here is T'Vondre Sweat, the Texas nose tackle. I would give him to a lot of teams because I think he's that good as a nose tackle prospect, but big, long, not just, I think he can one gap or two gap better than a lot of nose tackles can. I think he's versatile in that regard. And will he fall to 60 though? That one may be a pipe dream. If you can't grab him in this class, the next best probably pure nose tackle that I like is McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M. But we're talking about a difference of, fringe first rounder nose tackle and T'Vondre Sweat, all the way down to probably a day 3 nose tackle and McKinley Jackson, the Texas A&M defensive tackle. So a big gap there. That's why I do think T'Vondre may go a little bit higher than I'm saying here, because if you need one, there's really not a lot of dudes with top 100 grades at that position in this class. That's the Miami Dolphins, where defensive tackle, massive need. Interior offensive line, also massive need. Pick your poison. Since I went DT on the last mock draft, I'm going to talk about interior offensive line for them because guard to guard, all hitting free agency there. They're starters from a year ago. Now, while they were banged up and had some guys fill in, you have some names there in Lester Cotton, who had to play last year, Liam Eichenberg, who's played a good amount over the course of his career coming out of Notre Dame. Not well, albeit. They're going to probably still want to draft one at this position. To me, Christian Haynes, the interior offensive line from Connecticut, is the guy I would love for them. Not necessarily in the first round. Like first round, I said before, if one of those two DTs is on the board, that's where I'm going. But Christian Haynes, the Connecticut right guard, who I'd love to just slot into right guard, where Robert Hunt was last year. Maybe they re-signed him, maybe they don't. But I think he's perfect for that scheme. The guy can move, flat out move, one of the best on the move in this entire draft class. I think he's going to end up a top 50 player on my draft board. A lot of interior off the line are going to end up top 50 players. So hopefully that means one of them falls to pick 55 and they can snag one. But definitely some position that the Miami Dolphins should be attacking here in this draft. After what was that? They had that stretch there after they drafted Laramie Tunsil that they just ignored offensive line, right? I think there was like 4 straight drafts where they didn't use the top 100 pick on interior or on any offensive lineman. And then it's like, oh, why does their offensive line stink after we traded away Laramie Tunsil? I wonder why. It's a eat your vegetable sort of pick, but it's one that needs to happen this season for the Miami Dolphins. On to the New York Jets, where, I mean, the biggest need is someone that can contribute right away, right? I mean, it's just regardless. And the position where you can contribute right away in this class, to me, is offensive weapon, a receiver or a tight end. And while they don't have a second-round pick, that means they may be kind of out on guys who can be a real number 2 wide receiver in that kind of wraparound in the second round, where I said there's probably going to still be a lot of receiving talent. I do think Brock Bowers at pick 10 is a fit that just is going to make too much sense. That's one where the top 3 will be off the board, right? Malik Neighbors out of LSU, Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State, and Roma Dodze from Washington. Those guys, pipe dream. I think you're just planning on, if you're the New York Jets, that not even being an option. I would consider with where they are, maybe making a trade up, maybe offering a trade up for one of those guys. Now, not for a future first rounder for sure, but you're in such a desperation mode with this roster and with Aaron Rodgers' sort of career path that I think those 3 could make that big of an impact on this team early on, that I would be interested in jumping up, say, above the Titans at 7, who will obviously be in the market for a wide receiver, and getting one of them. If the cost ends up being a future first rounder, well, then we're saying no, and we're sitting at 10, and we're saying we'll take Brock Bowers, because that's a guy who's ready-made for the NFL already. Ready-made already, I don't know why I said that, but he is a guy that can make an immediate impact. And I go back to when Aaron Rodgers was at his absolute peak, 2011 season. What did he have in that offense? And now he's had a few peaks throughout his career. Obviously won a handful of MVPs, but that was the peak Aaron Rodgers. And what he had was Jermichael Finley at his peak as well. When he was back healthy, he was a dynamic, over the middle of the field, reliable weapon that Rodgers targeted a bunch in that Packers offense. Didn't have it since, after J. Mike had the unfortunate career-ending neck injury. Man, I love J. Mike back in the day. I think I had a J. Mike sweatshirt. They used to sell stuff out at Boston store up in Green Bay. I'm getting off topic here, but unfortunate, because if his career and Nick Collins' career too would have lasted longer, Packers might have had another. I'm going off on a real tangent here. Let's get back to Brock Bowers, because I do think that is going to be the Jets' best path towards immediate impact. Unless Olaf Fashanu falls. Again, I keep saying Olaf Fashanu, the Penn State offensive tackle. Don't foresee him falling to that point. Unless that's the case, it's one of those 2 is your best bet as a Jets fan to a guy year 1 changing the sort of calculus for that offense. All right, let's go to the New England Patriots. Took a wild ride there for the Jets. This one's a little more straightforward. For the New England Patriots, obviously quarterback, obviously wide receiver. But to me, offensive tackle is just an abject disaster there, with Trent Brown hitting free agency, Michael Onwenu hitting free agency. You really only have Calvin Anderson on this roster right now. And if you don't know who that is, don't feel too bad, right? So Jordan Morgan at pick 34 is where I am, fingers crossed, hoping, if I'm a New England Patriots fan. I think he's just a high floor, whether it's tackle or guard. I think he could stay at tackle, even though his arm length is kind of on the borderline. To me, the movement skills are not on the borderline whatsoever. He is a guy that can stick out there. Is he ever going to be Trent Williams? No. Is he ever going to be that super high-end guy? I just don't see quite of that sort of traits. But to me, a lot of parallels to his game to someone like Elgton Jenkins coming out of Mississippi State. Not again saying he's going to be Elgton Jenkins. Jenkins had longer arms. Jenkins played a bunch of positions over at Mississippi State when he was coming out. But I do think I see similar body types. I see similar movement skills. And I just see Morgan being a quality offensive tackle, the likes of which, in a weaker class would have gone in the first round. On to the AFC West here, where the Chiefs' biggest need is easily defensive tackle. And now they hopefully will bring Chris Jones back. Not hopefully, they have to bring Chris Jones back, right? You saw week 1 against the Lions, and now that's, one game. But he makes this defense go. He is the straw that stirs the drink, if you will, to use what everyone says about running backs as an analogy there. But they need that guy to be there. So hopefully they'll re-sign him. But then again, Derek Nottie is going to be a free agent. Tershawn Wharton was your DT3 there in terms of snaps, but he is a pass rush only type of guy. So they need a more every down option. And the one I like for them, and now he's a little bit of a project, but Leonard Taylor, the Miami defensive tackle, a third-year player coming out, declared early, was banged up this past year, but the talent as a one-gap penetrator, the ability to get upfield that I see from him on tape is really, I mean, after those top two guys, after the two first-rounders everyone talks about, Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton, who I've probably brought up 3 times already in this podcast, he has the best of penetration ability in this draft class after those two, in my opinion. And now he was miscast this past fall as a nose tackle primarily. Not to say that he can't do that. And that's obviously like he was playing there because he could do that. But his ideal position is more of a versatile defensive tackle who's not just getting plugged at the nose tackle position. A guy who can move up and down the line of scrimmage. So you probably still need, even if they do draft a guy like Leonard Taylor, and it would be pick 64. It would not be their first round pick. It would be that back of the second round pick that I would use it on. But even if they do, draft him, I do think a nose tackle needs to be signed or drafted even later in this class as well. All right, on to the Las Vegas Raiders, where I said I wasn't going to try to do mock draft fits, but this one just makes so much sense, and there's really not another position that I saw as glaring, and it's offensive tackle, where they don't really have options on the right side. I guess maybe you could put Thayer Munford there. We'll see, but it's offensive line, and pick 13, Taliasafuaga is just like, it's perfect, right? It just makes too much sense for that offense. So won't stay on this one too long because I already discussed it. But that one, we're just going to see that one mocked. Any of those tackles, right? Him, J.C. Latham from Alabama, Amarius Mims from Georgia. There's too many guys that make too much sense for this Raiders team to think they'll be going anywhere else in the first round. All right, on to the Denver Broncos, where surprisingly, not a lot of needs for this roster. You go up and down, and now cuts may be happening, trades may be happening. It's the quarterback position, right? And I said I wasn't going to talk quarterbacks, but that's where this biggest need is. But outside of that, it's a fairly complete roster with at least options, right? You may be losing Josie Jewell in free agency, but you drafted Drew Sanders last year. So the Arkansas linebacker. So there's like positions where you have potential. So that's why I went with kicker here. Will Lutz is a free agent. I have Joshua Carty, the Stanford kicker, at pick 146 as a dream scenario for this Denver Broncos team for his career, Joshua Carty at Stanford. 43 of 45 on kicks under 50 yards. The guy is lights out. Fantastic pick for the Denver Broncos, in my opinion. All right, before we get to the Chargers here, sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And it is the fact that I miss my good buddy, Austin Gale. Former co-host of the Tailgate podcast, now with The Ringer. We'll be seeing him down in Indy, but I had to get it off my chest here. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off our chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, back to the Los Angeles Chargers, where I see cornerback as the position that's a non-negotiable here. And even though they have like some options, I think Asante Samuel Jr. is the only corner on this roster I want seeing a football field next year, unfortunately for this Chargers team. So that's why I have, and I'm not going, if I'm them, Terrion Arnold at pick 5. Sorry, I've seen him mocked. I don't think that's where I want to address that need. I'm going Enos Rackstraw, the Missouri corner, at pick 37. I think there's a good chance he falls to this range. Now, there's a lot of corner-needy teams right at the top of that second round. There could be a nice little run on that position towards the back of the first, top of the second. They may be left holding their you-know-what. We'll see when it's all said and done. But I do think he's a guy that fits that kind of range in his skill set. Really smooth. The only thing missing with him has been the ball production over the course of his career. but I love the athlete. We'll see how he tests at the combine in Indy, but a good fit for that defense. Jim Harbaugh, what he's had at Michigan over the course of his career there, been corners. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have the greatest corners back when he was with San Francisco, but he does know how to identify defensive talent. That's for darn sure. All right, on to the AFC North, where the Baltimore Ravens were your champions, and their biggest need on a obviously fantastic roster, the roster I called the most complete roster in the NFL last year, is going to be a power running back, because Gus Edwards, the Sledwards, J.K. Dobbins, both hitting free agency this offseason. I think Audric Estime, the Notre Dame running back, would be an awesome addition to this offense. To me, he's Gus Edwards with more vertical speed, a big play version of Gus Edwards. He's a guy that needs a little bit of a runway. He's not a make-you-miss type, but when he gets a little bit of a runway, he had a lot of big runs on his tape this past year for the Irish. He's a guy I think is going to turn some heads with his athleticism at the combine. And at pick 93 in a weak running back class, I don't think it's too rich for him. I might have him a little bit lower down my board, but for this offense, he is just a perfect fit. All right, on to the Cleveland Browns, where another really darn good roster, right? And they bring back everyone, at least on offense, for this team. We'll see how they try to hold together that defensive line, but at least have some options there. To me, though, at linebacker with Anthony Walker, Sione Takitaki, both hitting free agency, this is a position they could address early. I'm looking at the second round and a guy in Junior Colson, the Michigan linebacker, one of the higher floor linebackers, just a great all-around linebacker who can play your Mike there and let Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah be your weak side linebacker. Really great between the tackles, really a great tackler as well. A guy who could thrive behind that penetrating defensive line, right? They are a playmaking defensive line. They are not a hold the gaps defensive line that's going to make things easy on their linebackers. He's a guy that can clean up when maybe guys get out of their gaps. Out of the Pittsburgh Steelers, where linebacker is another position here for them that I'd be addressing. Last year, they threw the farm at the position. I think they had like 8 different guys play 200 sets. It was just a rotation of who's who of, linebackers who have traveled across the entire NFL at this point in their careers. So maybe you want a little bit more long-term stability at that position, someone to address, not first round. There's not a linebacker I would take in this first round. But at pick 51, Edgerrin Cooper could be a guy that I'd throw behind this defensive line with his high-end ability to cover ground at the second level. He's not as freaky as Ryan Shazier was, coming out of Ohio State. So obviously why he was a first rounder coming out of Ohio State. But he's kind of that kind of athlete, right? Since Devin Bush failed, flamed out miserably in his Steelers career, they've not had that at the second level. And to me, Cooper can be that for them. A true do-it-all, but a guy that needs to develop. And if there's a team that's been able to develop linebackers, just defense in general, it's Mike Tomlin. It's Mike Tomlin and that staff there in Pittsburgh. So a good fit for them, in my opinion. All right, Cincinnati Bengals, last team of the North here. And it's tight end with them. They had, this was a need last year even when they tried to sign Irv Smith and he did diddly poo for them, to quote Jim Mora. So I think tight end's a big need. The problem is they're going to miss out on Brock Bowers, Georgetown. He's going to go too high. I don't see Jatavion Sanders as being necessarily a great fit there for what they do. And again, he's a guy who I don't love the value on. So an interesting play for them, and I'm going to try to walk it through here, is Florida State's Johnny Wilson in the third round, pick 80. I think that's the range in which he would go. And immediately what he does is he fills Tyler Boyd's role in that offense. He's your slot to start, and you put him on the path towards being a tight end in the future in terms of his diet and work in the weight room. Like, he's 237, 239 pounds, scraping lower-end tight end status, right? I think the kind of your skinny tight ends in the NFL end up around 245 pounds. That's not crazy. So 8 pounds away from that is more than doable over the course of a calendar year with a dedicated workout program. With his frame, I think he can have a Darren Waller-esque sort of glow up into a real deal tight end. And if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, yeah, it's more of a long-term play, but he's a guy who can, again, see the football field immediately as a slot wide receiver, and then maybe even just a year or 2 years down the line, you're calling him a tight end there in your offense. So maybe you don't see the vision, maybe you don't agree with the vision, but if you're the Bengals in a weak tight end class, beggars can't be choosers at this point. So I think it's a high risk, high reward sort of play. Now, before we get to the AFC South here, today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Last division here, the AFC South, where the Houston Texans were your champs a season ago. And I have cornerback as their biggest need, with Steven Nelson hitting free agency. Steven Nelson being the quintessential, we need to upgrade at corner, right? He's bounced to 4 teams in 6 years, started for all of them, right? KC to Pitt to Philly to Houston. Never been a liability, but each spot, each team was like, yeah, we should probably look elsewhere. We should probably do a little bit better. So the Houston Texans are that next spot. And to me, pick 23, Nate Wiggins is like, it makes so much sense. And now Wiggins, after the combine, I'm kind of predicting that he'll start getting back into the top 15 with his combine. I think he's that freaky of an athlete that I think he's going to go low 4.3s. I think he's going to jump somewhere around 40, maybe even higher. And people will start saying, oh, okay, we can forgive his tackling woes. But if he falls to pick 23, man, putting him across from Derek Stingley Jr. is just a freakish tandem on the outside and what those guys can do from a ball skills perspective, from a man coverage perspective, and just perfect for that DeMeco Ryans coach defense. So I'll bang the table for that one all draft season long until, again, he starts getting buzz for a little bit higher than that. On to the Jacksonville Jaguars, where an oddly complete roster. And I think I've had this take before, but you look at it and you're like, they could use a number 1 wide receiver. A lot of teams in the NFL could, but they have wide receivers. They could use offensive line help, but they have guys slotted into pretty much every position. They could use a secondary pass rusher outside Josh Allen, but they've used a lot of draft capital at the defensive line. And so they have guys they're hoping to develop. They have a zillion linebackers, as we know. And so really the one position is slot. And now, I think pick 17 could be, there's a handful of those first rounders that I think could play in the slot. Terran Arnold, obviously the Alabama corner. I don't think he makes it there. Quinyon Mitchell, the Toledo corner, I think could play in the slot. Cooper DeJean, I think could be a slot corner in the NFL as well. But I'm going to go a little bit farther down the board. I'm going to go to Mike Sainristil at number 96, the Michigan corner. And now Jim Harbaugh's not there anymore, so Trent Baalke can draft Michigan guys again. And now they have Darius Williams, but Darius Williams, even though he's small, is not a slot. He's been way better on the outside over the course of his career. Leave him there. Mike Sainristil, yes, another small guy, so maybe you're trending more towards a bigger slot corner since you have some size deficiencies on the outside already. But to me, he's one of the better ones. Handful of other names who I think could be good slot corners in the NFL around that range. Tyke Smith out of Georgia as well, one of those guys. Maybe Andrew Phillips, the Kentucky corner, could be one. And can't forget about Chris Abenstrain, Missouri corner. Almost did there. Almost did. All right, last 2 teams. Indianapolis Colts, where we kind of talked about their corner need. I don't want to keep going back to that corner need, but pick 15 could very well be that position. I'm going to say outside wide receiver, though, because Michael Pittman's hitting free agency. Alec Pierce is, how do I be polite about this? He's not a separator. That's polite. Not a separator. And you have Josh Downs to be the slot receiver. So you need an outside wide receiver, if you're really going to maximize Anthony Richardson's talents. Because the man can throw the peel down the football field, right? So I'm looking, and the more I think about this fit, the more I don't think it's too rich from a draft capital perspective. It's Brian Thomas Jr., the LSU wide receiver, at pick 15. He's not truly like what they wanted Alec Pierce to be, a true vertical threat that teams have to account for. And to me, he's not too dissimilar from Jameson Williams coming out. Now, Jameson Williams had another gear that I don't think even Thomas has. But Thomas is a little more solidly built, and Thomas has some wiggle and some yak ability to him as well, to where I think in a lot of Williams' failures since he got to the NFL haven't necessarily been talent-related, shall we say. So Brian Thomas, if that's a pick at pick 15, I would not be upset about it if I'm a Colts fan. I think he's someone that would pair really well with Anthony Richardson's skill set. Final team, Tennessee Titans. Obviously, offensive tackle, wide receiver. Those are probably your rounds 1 and 2. But they also have names at both those positions, right? Maybe this is the year Treylon Burks figures it out. Maybe this is the year that Dylan Radins figures it out, right? There are dudes in the fold there that could fill those positions. So I'm not going there, even though I think those should be the first, second round picks. Like, you still need to add talent there. But I'm going to say cornerback for the Tennessee Titans is the one position where, with Sean Murphy-Bunting and Christian Fulton hitting free agency, you really only have Roger McCreary in the slot and then crickets in this cornerback room in terms of guys that I would want. Caleb Farley, the first rounder, came out with the back issues, still has the back issues. I don't think you can bank on him really playing another down for you if you're the Tennessee Titans. And Rand Carthon, their GM. So I'm looking later on. They don't have a third-round pick here. So 7 and 38, I'm looking O-line wide receiver. All the way down the board to pick 107, and the guy I'm targeting is Kalen King, the Penn State corner. And now on the Senior Bowl recap episode, if you recall, I did not have a lot of nice things to say about his performance. However, his sophomore tape was still darn good. Their talent is still there. I'm still buying at that point in the draft. I'm still ready to take a guy with his talent at that point, even if his confidence is completely shot. Because that's you hope that you could coach that back into that guy we saw back in 2022. We'll see. But I think Kalen King falls to that point in the draft, truthfully, after his pre-draft process. We'll see how he tests down in Indy. But again, a position I would address later if I'm the Titans, but a position that definitely needs to be addressed this offseason. All right, there you have it. Your biggest needs, a draft fit for everyone in the AFC. Thank you for listening to Renner Ranks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.